Well, while I have both styles of Victrola VI, that's the VV-IX, out here, I figured I would do a little comparison between the two of them. The first one here, that's this one, is of course 1911. That's the very first year of production for the 9, which went 11 to 24, and then up to 26 for export. And the second one is the 1920. Now right away you can see, while there are many similarities, there's also differences. The 1920, the lid is a little bit higher. It has feet added to the bottom. And it has an isolated horn. They both have 2-spring motors, although both motors are of different styles. This one has a motor you'd be familiar with from the outside horn Victors before 1910, while this one looks pretty much like the same motor of every Victrola after 1918 or so, with the single spring barrel all the way up to the last ones. Both are mahogany. Both are red mahogany, but the 1920 is somewhat darker with age and a little bit more alligatoring to it. Both are roughly the same condition. Nice. They both have the large turntable. Different colors of felt. This would have been a dark green, like this, while this one is more of a lighter color. This one has a fat tone arm. This one has the skinny tone arm. And this one, of course, has the fully isolated horn of all of the later Victrolas made after 1913, except the tiny tabletop 4. That didn't get it until, I believe, 1918 or somewhere, maybe 17. Very similar lookout under the lid, or look under the lid, I should say. Different speed controls, obviously. This has a dial speed control. This has a manual set one. Or not manual, it's a lever set one, which is completely mechanical, doesn't move. This one has a needle in there that you will actually be able to see move as the speed ramps up. This one, your motor board pivots with a little knob that should be there but isn't. I'll get one later. This one, the motor board has to be completely removed with 4 screws, and there's no lift knob, which it kind of did need. These ones came standard with the exhibition reproducer. So did this 1920, but somebody has added a number 2 reproducer on there, which is common enough. After 1918, 1919, the dealers were pushing them as replacements for the exhibition, and many people did get it. We get a B. Surprisingly, your needle cups here really don't change at all. I mean, look at them. The same thing, same size, same 3 compartments, same needle. Let me see if there's any difference here in the needle, the spent needle tins themselves. This 1920 right there. Other than the lid not being completely down on the 1920, there's not a lot of difference. They look pretty much the same. Victrola decal. Really no difference there. Not enough to worry about anyway. And the build quality, of course, is excellent. Now, without the feet, you'll notice, Mr. B, please leave me alone. You will notice that the cabinet here, let me see here. Yep, we got a B problem. I guess the B wants the Victrola. The cabinet without the feet is almost an inch lower. And this cabinet has brand new rubber feet, rubber bumpers on the bottom, which raise it up almost a little over 1/4 inch. More like 1/2 inch. So this one, once its little rubbers have been replaced under there, will be even higher yet. And of course, the depth of the lid itself is raised. But notice here, the lid stay really doesn't change much. By 1920, they have a nice little stop at the bottom with 2 screws and holding it in place. Wow, in 1911, it was just a single screw there, screwed into the wood. But the lid stay itself doesn't change. 11 years later, they're still using the same, no, 1911. 9 years later, they're still using the same one, although they will continue using the same lid stay right up to the end anyway. Now, I'm going to say that the red mahogany on this one is slightly darker than that found on this one. Under the lid where the sun never reached. it still looks like it did back then when it was new. And it's still not fumed mahogany. That's really dark. This is still red mahogany, but it's gotten slightly darker. And of course, having the isolated horn, you get louvers that look like that, because that's truly the opening of the horn itself, all the way to the tone arm. There's nothing in there, just air. Well, with this one, you just have a louvered panel there. There's nothing behind that, except the wooden ramp, which is the internal wooden horn. Oh, that, you know, that has the motor sitting right in the middle of it. Same style of doors, not a lot. They're a little bit smaller doors, a little bit smaller. These, of course, have the piano hinges, while this style has a separate hinge top and bottom. Both work just fine. These look a little more decorative, I think, a little more kind of an antique style. And of course, your knobs change. While they look similar on the outside, this knob is basically a screw. It screws right into the wood. It's got a screw end on it, screws right in. While this style is a screw here and a separate knob. That's it. They do not interchange unless you want to start drilling holes in your 1911, 1912 machine. Now, this style of cabinet will continue through 1914. However, in 1913, it does get an isolated horn. But the cabinet itself pretty much stays looking the same, like this. No feet yet. In 1915, they got the feet. And they would keep that style right to the very end. And this was Victrola's, the Victor Company's most popular machine. Chances are, when you're going out to look at somebody's old Victrola somewhere that they've advertised without sending you a picture, I'm going to say 75% of the time, it's going to be a Victrola the Ninth. It's going to be some version of this machine. This is the quintessential Victrola. It's most popular of its time. You know, people, they started off at 50 bucks for this one in 1911, which is a lot of money at a time when a single penny had actual buying power. That was a lot of money. By the time it reached the 1920s, I believe it was up to either $75 or $1.25. I'm not really sure. Somewhere around in there. It had easily come close to doubling in price. Inflation, you know, it happens. That and the machine, you know, the machines had become so popular they could charge a little bit more for them. But this was a Victrola dealer's bread and butter. These machines. This, the 6 and the 4. Those are the most popular ones. Then in 1921, you had the Victor Victrola 50. Hugely popular portable that they just could not keep in stock or make fast enough. They were that popular. And you had your floor machines, which were mostly for people that had a little more money to spend. I mean, not the 10, which was the 11 or the 12, I forget which one, the basic X. You know, that was this machine with legs, essentially. And they were popular too, but not everybody had the floor space for them. Wealthier people could afford the big 16s. They were all the money in the world in the teens and 20s. That was huge money for that time. But most people had one of these. And they're excellent machines. They have a wonderful sound. They're extremely well made. Very, very durable machines. Very durable. You know, it really does take a lot to screw these up. You know, mostly really, really poor storage or poor handling, or doing things like throwing things on top of them when they're in the shed, stuff like that. Yeah, that's going to do damage. They are just wood. And they're, you know, they're mahogany, but they're mahogany veneer, but the wood underneath is actually good quality wood. It's not junk. It's not pine under there or something like that. And some of this is actually like up here, over here. This is all solid mahogany. The entire horn assembly inside here, which is multiple pieces of wood, that is all solid mahogany in there, makes for a very rigid case on these older models. Very rigid. Not that these aren't rigid, but you saw there's a lot of open, in the last video I showed there's a lot of open space in there, but this one there really isn't. Very nice machines. Today's market, you know, you hear every now and then someone finding one for $25 or $50. People who get them that cheap are very, very lucky. Very lucky. Because these days, that exhibition reproducer right there, in non-rebuilt condition, that means it needs everything, they're going for about 50 bucks on eBay by themselves, with needing everything on them. Oh, the diaphragm, the gaskets, the back gasket, which alone is $14. You know, all that may or may not need drilled, have the little thumb wheel drilled out of the needle arm there. You know, there's all kinds of problems. $50, and a similar price to be had for the number 2s. So right there, if you find one of these for $50 and it has a Victor reproducer on it, you've already, you know, gotten your money out of it pretty much. And on average, when these things have been serviced, fully serviced, and there's a lot of work that goes into that, I know because I do it, you're going to be looking at between $475 and $600, depending on the condition, you know, what had to be done to it and everything like that. That's eBay price, internet price, you know, phonograph show price maybe. And a lot of people don't really know what everything means. Everything serviced on a machine means, one, the reproducer has been rebuilt. The tone arm support has been adjusted and cleaned and greased. The auto brake has been adjusted so it works, which means sometimes means you got to put new leather, maybe new spring on it. The speed has been set to 78 RPM because I'm going to say 95% of the records and all of the Victor records you're going to encounter are 78 RPM. You may find an occasional Columbia that's 80 or something like that, but most are going to be 78, and most people aren't going to realize it and play their 80s at 78 anyway. It means cleaning of the case with cotton cleanser or some other, you know, stuff like that, which has to be done very carefully, very gently. You just can't slop it on there and quickly wipe it off and it's instant shine. It doesn't happen. You're lifting off, gently removing layers of old cigarette smoke, paste wax, dust, and just age, you know, normal fingerprint oils and all that from the wood. It takes a long time to do that. You might have 5, 7, 10 hours into a case removing all of that, depending on how dirty it is to start with. And it also means that if there's a loose joint in the case, you have to re-glue it. If veneer has started to lift, you have to re-glue that, which is time consuming because you just can't throw glue on it. It's done in 2 minutes. It might take all day. You might have to clamp the machine and let it sit for a day or two, depending on the extent. What else? Of course, replacing the little rubber bumpers. That's not a huge job, but it does have to be done, or these machines will scratch the hell out of whatever you put them on. Then there's loose screws. You always find these. Like there, you know, this screw here, or one of the screws in the lid hinge back there. They get loose over time, and they don't want to tighten anymore. So you have to adjust those. You have to fill and re-tap, you know, get the screw back in there so it stays tight. You might find one screw like that. You might find all of them like that. So all of that has to be taken into account when someone calls their machine fully serviced. And you have to do the cleaning without altering the original finish. Some people like to refinish everything. They just strip off the history and they slap on a new coat of whatever. Sometimes it's done very nicely. You know, they do it properly. Now when Victor finished these cabinets, they used a mixture. You see, this is a lot of grain in that wood, and you have to fill the grain before you do, you know, the final coatings on there. They used something involving seaweed to do it, and they were experts at it. You have to duplicate that process if you want the finish to look authentic, and then you end up with a machine that looks brand new, but it doesn't look like there's any age on it. Some people like it. I don't judge. You want that, that's what you get. But some people like that. But today, most collectors like a machine that shows its age. It shows that it's an antique. It takes 100 years or 109 years to get a finish like this. To age it properly, this is a shellac finish. Shellac is a natural material. Like all natural materials, it does age. You know, sunlight, exposure to humidity, whatever it might be, it causes aging to happen. And it takes a long time. To duplicate that age, yes, there are ways to do it. I'm not going to tell you what they are because that's fraudulent to do that. But it's easier not to screw it up in the first place. To gently clean it properly, leave the alligatoring alone, leave, you know, the little patches of light here and there alone. Use a wood feeder if it's dry. That'll return some color to the wood. And gentle beeswax furniture polishes, and it'll look fine. But all that takes a lot of time. A lot of time. Not as much time as a complete refinishing would take. For that, you need specialized knowledge, tools, work area, chemicals. You know, it's a lot of work involved in that, and it'll probably triple the price of the machine if it's being done by a shop for you. They don't work cheap. Just taking one of these things apart entirely is hours of work, careful work, and you have to make sure you don't lose anything while you're doing it. And that's what you have to do if you do a full refinish. So I don't like to work with, that kind of thing. I leave those for people that are much better at it than I am. Anything that's refinished, that goes to cabinet maker, furniture shop, whatever, not me. This is what I like to work with. Good original finishes with honest age on them that I can bring back to look decent, to look nice, to look like a real antique. This is how you see them in the museums. You don't see brand new, spotless. Go to the Victrola Museum sometime and see what's there. Those are honest machines. Not ones, there's some very, very nice ones there, don't get me wrong, some incredible machines you'll see there. But the average machines like this, they look like this. They look natural, like nobody's gone and just refinished the whole thing and trying to make it look like it's 1909 again or whatever. It's, they keep the age. And this will clean up a little bit, like you always get metal polishing. Some people will buff the metal till it shines like new. I don't like to do that. I want the patina on the metal to match the machine, which means if it's a little toned, I leave it just like that. That's toned. That's normal for a machine from 1911 in original condition. High finish on there, like the chrome finish of a brand new car bumper, no, that's not how it should look. This is, unless you walked into a dealer in 1911 and bought it brand new. It shouldn't look like that. But again, if you find green crud all over the chrome, all over the nickel plating, which is what this is, you can clean that off. There's ways to do that. The way I like the most is I dip them and leave them sit in evaporust. It's actually for removing rust from metal, but it also works for removing green crud from nickel-plated parts without removing the toning or removing the nickel plating. You don't want that. But there you go. There's a look at the 1911 and the 1920, or I should say the first style and the last style of the Victor Victrola VI. The most common of all Victrolas and the most popular.